Day for force against what he called Islamic State killers. I want to bring in Mark Wallace, the former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. He just launched the Counter-Extremism Project, a not-for-profit group working to expose those funding extremist groups. Mark, I appreciate you being with us. The president was elected on his doctrine really to end wars, to get out of the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan. But this morning, as he stood before the UN, he's really attempting to lead one. Is this Obama's war, no longer a continuation of the old ones?
Thank you for having me, Anderson. First of all, I think he really owned it with this speech. I think it was a very strong speech, and he made it clear that this was a grave threat to international peace and security and our own national security. So I thought the president's speech was very strong, very powerful, and very clear in terms of saying that we have to fight ISIS and extremist groups with the military as well as other tools that we have. And there was no doubt that I think that he owned it today.
This coalition that the U.S. has built, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and others, we were talking about this earlier on the program, but I mean, on the one hand, some of these countries are now fighting against ISIS alongside the U.S., but with the other hand, they're also still funding extremist groups, they're extremist madrasas, they're funding Salafist groups, jihadist groups in a variety of countries around the world.
It's a good point, and obviously Ambassador Jafari, the Syrian ambassador, made comments about that. I served with Ambassador Jafari earlier, and I think that the question here, that's what you're going to see later on today, hopefully a binding Security Council resolution. That doesn't mean the countries won't dishonor that resolution, but a potentially binding Security Council resolution and a coalition of Arab states that are joining in this fight. We have to reflect on this for a minute. It's still a historic moment when 5 Arab states joined together as part of that coalition. Obviously, a lot of the attention has been focused on the Qataris, who have engaged in potentially supporting a lot of these groups particularly. But the fact that they have joined this coalition, hopefully will adhere to a Security Council resolution that's adopted later on, will be a sign of a renewed focus of not supporting extremism, joining this coalition, and realizing the incredible danger and threat that this has become. So I agree with that. That's a real legitimate area of concern, but hopefully what you're seeing is a seismic tipping point, whatever analogy you want to use, about this issue, and that this coalition is hopefully going to change things.
Do you see signs of that tipping point? Do you see signs that some of these governments now are, realize that their own security, their own future is at stake?
I spent a lot of time in that region, and I have to say, this is not intended to sound in any way diminish the White House's role, which I think they did a very good job today with the president's speech. But in many ways, a lot of these countries have been agitating, cajoling, begging for this kind of coalition now for some time. So I do think that it might be a little bit on its head. Did we lead this coalition, or did the coalition inspire us to join it? So I definitely hear different things out of that region, and you're seeing a totally different change in tone. Remember, any time over the last 2 decades, 3 decades, whatever period of time, the notion that 5 moderate Arab states would step up and engage in a military action on other Muslim countries is quite remarkable, and it has to be. We have to hope that it is a sign of better things to come, including, importantly, the financial support of some of these extremist groups and the ideological support that you've seen in the past. And I think that the attention that will be closely paid is to the Qataris. Are they going to fall in line in a much broader way, other than flying, according to reports, 1 plane in support but not dropping ordnance? And I think a lot of attention will be paid there.
A group like ISIS, how independent are they in terms of finances? I mean, we've heard so many reports about the huge coffers that they have from oil revenues, from the pilfering of antiquities, a variety of means, raiding banks. How much do they depend on big donors? Or are they, at this point, do they need donors, or are they pretty much self-sufficient?
Well, look, extremism has been around for a long time, Anderson. I mean, this isn't a new thing, but what the extremists have done, what ISIS has done, is build a financial architecture to support their activities, and frankly, a communications and social media architecture that has supported their recruitment efforts and the extension of their ideology. I think that financial architecture has to be fully deconstructed, whether it's oil smuggling, whether it's taxing their local people, whether it's the donor system that are out there. But I think that ISIS is finding money from wherever it can. There's a lot of talk about smuggling, but even a couple $1 million a day of illicit oil sales to ISIS pays for a lot of recruits, and it pays for a lot of weapons in the black market. So we have to cut them off on every angle.
Mark Wallace, I appreciate you being with us. Thanks very much. Up next, President